Hi, it's Stephen here. Welcome to Bread Philharmonic. Last week I received a couple questions about mixing and thought it would be a good opportunity to do a video on mixing science basics. At first glance, it seems quite simple. Flour and water are simply being combined, but something much more interesting on a chemistry level is happening. Mixing is important because it is the first step of the bread baking process and sets the stage for everything else to happen. Mixing has two main goals: uh, achieve the target dough temperature and achieve the correct dough consistency. Again, target dough temperature, correct dough consistency. For most wheat-based doughs, a target dough temperature of 23 to 26 Celsius, 73 to 79 Fahrenheit provides an excellent starting point. This temperature range gives the yeast and bacteria an environment where fermentation can proceed at a steady, predictable pace. Dough that's too cold ferments too slowly, while dough that's too warm ferments too quickly and becomes more difficult to handle. Everything during mixing is really in service of these two goals: dough temperature and dough consistency. Traditional mixing consists of two parts: a slow mix um, and a fast mix. The objective of the slow mix is simply to bring the ingredients together into a uniform mass. And every particle of flour should become hydrated with no dry pockets remaining. Now the flour, it's kind of interesting. It contains two important proteins: glutenin, which is responsible for the dough's strength and elasticity, and gliadin, which is responsible for the dough's extensibility or its ability to stretch. It's the yin and yang. On their own, these proteins are simply sitting in dry flour, but once water is added, everything changes. Water acts as the catalyst that allows glutenin and gliadin to bond together, forming gluten. No water, no gluten. After the ingredients are fully combined, the next stage is the fast mix. This is where most of the gluten development occurs. As the dough is mixed more vigorously, the gluten strands become longer, stronger, and more organized. The dough changes before your eyes. It starts out rough and sticky, then it becomes smoother and more elastic, pulling away from the side of the mixing bowl, gathering around the hook, creating beautiful ribbons of dough. I really encourage you to stare into the bowl and watch the entire mix from beginning to end. Observe the transformation. So, why does gluten even matter? As mixing continues, gluten forms into a complex web-like network throughout the dough. That network has one very important job: to trap the carbon dioxide gas produced later during fermentation. A good way to picture it is as a stretchy mesh net. During fermentation, yeast and bacteria metabolize sugars and produce carbon dioxide. The gluten network traps these gases and expands while still holding everything together. Without sufficient gluten development during mixing, much of that gas escapes into the air and the loaf never reaches its full potential. Between the slow mix and fast mix, many bakers include a resting period. This pause is typically called either an autolyse or a fermentolyse, depending on the ingredients included. An autolyse is performed by mixing the flour and water only during the slow mix, then allowing this mixture to rest for approximately 20 to 60 minutes before adding the remaining ingredients. Salt is always omitted because it is hygroscopic and hinders the process by robbing water away from the flour. During this rest, the flour continues absorbing water, gluten begins forming naturally with very little mechanical mixing, and amylase enzymes begin breaking down starches, long chains of sugars, into simple sugars that serve as food for the yeast and lactic acid bacteria in fermentation. Yet the real star in the autolyse are protease enzymes, which break down proteins, gently weakening and relaxing the developing gluten network. While that may sound like a bad thing, controlled gluten degradation actually makes the dough more extensible and easy to shape. The result is dough that develops more easily and requires less mixing. Less mixing also means more flavor, as bread flavor compounds are not oxidized out of the dough with each hook rotation. Fermentolyse is very similar, except the sourdough is included into the mixture during the rest period. So it's just flour, water, and sourdough. Again, salt is omitted until after the rest. For me, fermentolyse has some advantages over Autolyse. Because sourdough consists of both flour and water, by including the sourdough, I feel it is easier to gauge the final hydration of the dough. Because the amylase enzymes are only just starting to break down starches into sugars, the risk of over-fermenting the dough is minimized. Because there will be some fermentation, I recommend using a smaller percentage of sourdough in the recipe when using fermentolyse. Regardless, both techniques, Autolyse and fermentolyse, allow time, not just mechanical mixing, to develop the dough. Now, let's circle back to dough consistency. Dough consistency is arguably more important than dough temperature. If the dough is too cold, then place it into a warm area. If dough is too hot, then place it into a cooler area. But once the dough is mixed, it's mixed, and there is no recovery. The toothpaste is out of the tube and you can't put it back. So, how can you tell when to stop mixing? And how can you tell when the dough is properly mixed? Many bakers use what's called the Windowpane Test. I prefer the term Bubblegum Test. Take a small piece of dough and gently stretch it between your fingers. If it stretches into a thin, translucent sheet without tearing, the gluten network is well developed. The dough has the same consistency as bubblegum, and when it's stretched thin enough, it even resembles a blown bubble. If it tears quickly instead of stretching, the gluten still needs a little more development, more mixing time. On the other hand, if the dough appears wet and is also stringy, then it has been overmixed. The bonds between the water and starch have been broken, and the water released back into the bowl. If while mixing you notice the dough start to change in appearance from matte to wet, stop mixing and test the dough consistency using the Bubblegum Test. So to wrap up, throughout the entire mixing process, the focus remains on two things: dough temperature and dough consistency. Get those two things right, and the dough is well on its way to becoming exceptional bread. I really hope you enjoyed today's video and picked up a few techniques that will help you bake even better bread. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Bread Philharmonic. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to continue creating more bread baking content for you. If you have any questions, suggestions, or topics you'd like for me to cover in future videos, leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for spending part of your day with me. I'm Stephen Kramer, and this has been Bread Philharmonic. Remember, great bread isn't an accident. It's the result of understanding the craft. Until the next time, keep learning, keep baking, and enjoy every loaf.